the Senate yesterday. The vote split down party lines, leaves the future of President Biden's two-track infrastructure plan in jeopardy. Joining us now, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Very good to have you, Mr. Secretary. You tweeted the bipartisan infrastructure framework makes possible the safe roads, modern transit, and universal broadband that Americans are asking for. We cannot miss this moment. So how do we get to yes? How do we not miss this moment?
Well, it feels that things are still headed in a good direction. We're witnessing all of the procedural complexity of the United States Congress, and it can be messy. But over the coming days, feel confident of reaching the point where this can get to the floor. And the sooner this can get to the president's desk for signature, the better. You know, I've been on the road last week seeing firsthand the need in communities as different as tribal country in Arizona and the south side of Chicago. And what every single part of this country has in common is seeing the immediate need to do more for transit, to fix roads and bridges, to do something for our ports and airports, to get lead out of our pipes, get everybody internet. People get it. There is a broad consensus, including among parties that are usually not on the same side. You know, today the president and the vice president are going to be sitting down at the White House with supporters of this package who come from the business leadership and business community and from labor, who are rarely pulling in the same direction. We got you know, everybody from different building trades organizations to the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, all saying, let's do this. So there is a ton of positive bipartisan momentum for this. But as we've seen again and again in Washington, nothing moves in a straight line, and there are going to be more twists and turns to get this done.
Well, senators are asking for a new vote on Monday. I'm just curious, I mean, what's going to get, you say that there is a lot of bipartisan agreement. What can get a vote through? And so that this can actually become a reality? And are you concerned that there is not a bipartisan reality for infrastructure?
So what we have is Republican and Democratic senators, a critical mass of them, who have shaken hands with the president and said, this is the framework of what we want to do. Now, within the framework, it turns out, as always, the devil's in the details, and there are pieces that still need to be worked through. So the next thing that has to happen is a vote, basically a vote to have a vote. So it's a procedural move that lets the debate begin in earnest, the actual process of getting the text out there. And there are a few areas that still need to be smoothed over, but the overall picture looks encouraging. And that's important because you know, I think Americans are really impatient to get this done. I mean, not just within the context of this year, but the many years that there has been a lot of talk about infrastructure. What we're seeing now is that you know, this framework gives us a chance to do the biggest investment, for example, in public transit that we've ever done as a country, the biggest investment in passenger rail since Amtrak was created in the first place, the most going to roads and bridges since the Eisenhower administration, when they set up the interstate highway system to begin with. These are big moves, big things that are possible, and remarkably, they appear to be possible with bipartisan support. Soon that will truly be put to the test, and that needs to lead to legislation that the president, I know, is very eager to sign.
Secretary Buttigieg, it's Willie Geitz. Good to see you this morning. We've been out on the highways a lot this summer, driving around and talking to the kids about just what a marvel it is that these roads even exist. You take them for granted, and we all have our complaints about them. But the idea that somebody sat down and said, let's build roads clear across the country, the engineering that went into that, the work that went into that, the ingenuity that went into that. And I think people are looking at, okay, what's the next step of what infrastructure means in 2021, as we've gotten well past generations past highways, at least the establishment of them. So what is it? Let's bring it down to a ground level. Let's say this bipartisan package gets through and it's passed. What does it look like practically to an average American? What changes in the next couple of years? What are the updates? What is that highway system of the 1950s of today?
Yeah, you're right. We count on the highway system now and forget how audacious and ambitious it was in the 1950s, when a cross-country road trip could take 2 weeks. And you might not be certain that there were going to be gas stations where you needed them unless you had your route just so. Well, the same thing is true now with electric vehicles. People aren't always certain that they can get a distance of thousands of miles or hundreds of miles and know where the charging stations are. We're going to change that, building a network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations across the country. You think about the internet. You know, the internet connection is today in the economy what the interstate highway connection used used to be. Today, you need both, and that's why we need to get every single American affordable, fast internet, which is part of what this bill is going to do. So these are the kinds of changes we need looking to the future. But the truth is, we've also just got to take care of what we've got. Those very same highways that were built in the 50s, we've been coasting off of some of those investments for a long time. Last time you and I spoke, I'd been in the Hudson River tunnels looking at 1910 construction that hundreds of thousands of passengers still count on. It's true when you look in every part of the country that you see some piece of infrastructure. In Pittsburgh, looking up, we were on a riverboat to look at locks and dams, and then looked up at one of the most important bridges in the city. And you can see the mesh that they've installed hanging under the bridge to catch the pieces of concrete that fall off of it from time to time. So in addition to the exciting futuristic stuff we can do from electric vehicles beyond, we've also just got to take care of what we've got.
Secretary Buttigieg, good morning. Jonathan Lemire. Another way that infrastructure is in the news, beyond, of course, the deliberations in the Senate, is a potential target of cyber attacks. The oil pipeline of a few weeks ago, that attack, chief among them. And I know with concerns, there's some of it's ransomware, some of it could be even more malicious, attempts to knock out critical pieces of infrastructure, power, water, whatever it might be. Can you tell us a little bit about, especially this year, as this issue really comes to focus, things that your department is doing to safeguard critical pieces of the American infrastructure against cyber attacks originating either domestic or overseas?
We're paying close attention to this, and in particular working very closely with the Department of Homeland Security, which has a lot of the resources on cyber, as well as the overall national security effort led, of course, by the White House and by the president. The president has made clear publicly and in no uncertain terms that the U.S. will respond, that we aren't going to tolerate the kinds of cyber attacks that are being sponsored or blessed by state actors. But of course, we also see in some ways the sort of distribution or democratization of these capabilities. You know, some of these ransomware things are now pretty much off-the-shelf software that any criminal organization or individual can acquire, which is why we're working with the relationships we have to help encourage players to harden their targets. Look, so much infrastructure is not things like the U.S. Interstate highway system, for example, which is state and federally owned and operated. When you look at water systems, those are owned and operated by small towns or communities. When you look at electrical grids or pipelines, they're owned and operated by companies. Some of those companies aren't very big, and some of them don't have a lot of resources to deal with this. So we have to partner with them to make sure that they have taken the steps to be more immune. Now, we're talking about vaccinating and inoculating the country against COVID. We've got to do something to better inoculate our critical infrastructure against these cyber threats.
Secretary Pete Buttigieg, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. It's good to see you. And the Democrats are also